from yesterday, we come to know, that things may not necessarily exist 100% from the object side, right? Because if things should necessarily exist 100% from the object side, nothing to do with the subjective mind, then we have to say that the flower and the color of the flower, say the pink color of the flower and the flower, these two are just one, because there is no way of saying, these two can be different from another angle, from one, one from one angle. There's no way, there's no alternative left with us, because there's, the subjective mind doesn't play any role in bringing about or role in the existence of something. So whereas yesterday we come to know that the subject mind also has some power to contribute to the existence of something. Contrary to that, our innate feeling tells us that things exist 100% from the object side. This is our innate feeling. And this 100% existing from the object side is what the Swatantrika Madhyamikas refer to as true existence, and the Prasangikas would refer to as inherent existence, like that, right? So still, it is not, it is not as easy as what we said so far, but this is like opening the door, to explore into the reality. So, yesterday when you speak about the flower in front of me and the pink color of this flower, are these two one or different? Then either you have to say one or you have to say they are different. Say if you say these two are one, then these two become inseparable. Inseparable in the sense you cannot really separate these two. But whereas in reality we can separate better put it this way, the mug and the red color of the mug, right? The mug and the red color of the mug. So actually these two, if you say these two are one, then this mug should be always red, because these two are not separable, So whereas we can color it differently, next time we can color it yellow. So then the mug, the mug and the color, the original red color, these two are separated, right? So this means that the mug and the original, the red color of the mug, these two are not identical. These two can be separated because, while the color is changed, the basic mug remains the same. If these two are one, just as the color is changed, the basic mug also should change. But the basic mug remains, and the color, the red color of the mug, disappears. So which means that one is prone to disappear more easily than the other. This means these two are not one, right? So if you say these two are one, then this contradicts this idea. These two are not one, because if these two are one, they should have the two of them should have exact characteristics. But in true sense, one is more prone to disappearance, and the other can remain, more strongly, more stably in its own way. We can change the color of the mug, we can remove the red color of the mug, and still the mug remains. The basic mug remains, right? So this means that it's not exactly the one. So then, if you say that these two are not exactly one, this means that these two are different. But objectively, you cannot say that it is different. It's just one, because if you are asked to point to, this is really very important, very important. If you are asked to point to where the red color of the mug is, you point there, the same mug. Again, if you ask where the mug is, you point there, the same. Objectively, these two are not different. So then, but if you have to say these two are exactly one, again it contradicts many things. So this means that these two are not exactly one. When you say these two are not exactly one, it means these two are distinct or separate. But separate not objectively. So separate where? Oh yeah, on the mental level, or on the nominal level, on the mental level. These two are separate. So the separateness, not identically, not as identically one. So the separateness of the mug and the red color of the mug, the separateness, does it exist? Yes, it exists. It does exist. Exists where? Objectively or mentally? Mentally, right. So now we come to know that it is not always true that if something exists, that should exist always objectively. There can be something which can mentally, exist, mentally exist, and can be rightly said to exist. Right? So far, our innate ignorance tells us that, if something exists, it should exist necessarily objectively. Or how many objects are there on the table? Then immediately you'll try to look objectively. Oh, the pen, one. What is this? Coaster. The pen, the coaster, the tissue, the flower, the mug, the paper, the recorder, and the books, and the tablecloth. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Right? Or how many objects are there on the table? Then you say 9 objects. Immediately you go to see what things are found objectively. This is our natural instinct. And don't blame everything for natural instinct. This is what deceives us, and this is what torments us. Right? Torments, which inflicts pain on us. Believing that things should necessarily exist. Things should necessarily exist from their own side, from object side. This is the final ignorance. Right? Now, from studying the Sutrantikas, single and the different, we come to get some kind of clue that for something to exist, it need not necessarily exist from the object side. Sometimes, something can exist even though it is not found 100% objectively. Mentally, when something exists, it can still be posited as existing. Right? For example, the separateness of the cup and the red color of the cup. These two, the separateness of the cup and what? And the red color of the cup. So these two, the separateness of that is not found objectively. Objectively, these two are just one. But then this is true. It is separate. So then how does it exist? Where does it exist as separate? Objectively? No. In your mind. So, the separateness of the mug and the red color of the mug, it simply exists by means of our mental thinking, and yet it can exist. It exists. We can posit that to exist. So which means that for something to exist, now we come to discover for the first time, very likely for the first time since beginningless time until now, for the first time we come to discover that for something to exist, it may not necessarily exist from the object side. Sometimes there are things which exist, simply on the mental level, and yet rightly can be posited to exist. Right? Okay. Now look, so this is the discovery, all this quite small, but this is the, the gateway to the emptiness of prasangika. Because emptiness of prasangika says that there is no objective existence at all. And now you have covered that, you have discovered that although I cannot still understand that everything is, existing on the mental level, but still I have discovered something so small that there can be, the possibility where something can exist even though it does not exist objectively, right? So this is a very small discovery that we have made, and this is actually the very small gate from which the whole world of, the ultimate reality of emptiness, according to the Buddha, is unraveled, right? On that basis, so say, I don't know if you have understood it, seems like, even I don't understand it, this is what I'm imitating from my teachers. And sometimes what happens is that, someone who is supposed to be the teacher explains it, although doesn't really not following what exactly he or she is saying. And the students, simply because of hearing the words of those highly experienced former teachers, the students understand it first before the teacher. This is possible, right? So I don't mean to say that because I don't understand it, you also are taking for granted that you don't understand it. I don't mean to say this. Perhaps some of you, because of this explanation, could have got a kind of glimpse, tingling experience of that. I don't know. But for myself, no doubt, it's just, imitation. Now the question is, say now this is the point up to which we have, reached. Now the next point. So what about this thing? Now, first of all, before we, go further, let me ask you, now, even if it is on the intellectual level, it's still very precious. Sometimes people tend to, those people who are not so exposed in the intellectual, exchanges, debates in this thing, they tend to, because of the drawback, they tend to denigrate, they tend to deprecate, they tend to, accuse or whatever, these intellectual things. So, say there is someone who is simply intellectually so, so learned and not at all taking any keen interest in the practice. So for that person, in order to let the person translate the intellectual learning into the practice, to translate that into the real practice, we have, there may be a situation where you are to say that, intellectual learning itself is just useless, like that. In order to inform the person to translate that into the practice. But in true sense, if that is if that is not the purpose, then in true sense, the intellectual learning is the first step. So without which, it's almost impossible that we can get there to the actual understanding. So the intellectual learning is really very, very important. For that, you can know the value of this because we trust the Buddha. And in Lamrim Chemo, the great exposition of the Great Path of Enlightenment, which is translated, available in English nowadays. So in the first volume, just in the opening passage, you read, and Lama Tsongkhapa cited from the Buddha's, Chom, connection, the Buddha's teaching. So there, the Lama Tsongkhapa cited as to how important it is to, first of all, go through the intellectual learning. So he said that the philosophical learning, this is the lamp to see the reality, And so similarly, all, good qualities associated with this are mentioned very clearly. So you make it a point to read that. So now the question is, now we at least, even if it is a very baby-like understanding, but still we have come to some point, whether intellectually or to some experience, right? Now let me ask you this question. Is it, from what we have learned so far, from yesterday and today, is it necessary that for something to exist, it should necessarily exist from the object side? No. What example? No, just tell me something, at least, at least you have some kind of intellectual, if possible. Anger, I don't think, but at least at this point, I don't know if you have realized emptiness. If you have realized emptiness, then I have no qualm. Otherwise, up to this point, someone who has gained to the level where I'm teaching right now, for them, anger is something, more difficult to understand as lacking objective existence. Sorry? Subtle impermanence. How?
We can't realize it directly until we think about it.
But still, it is our weakness. It entails our weakness. Not that, it is mentally imputed. It is our weakness. The eye senses, our senses, eye sense consciousness. It is so weak, that it cannot see the impermanence. It is the weakness of our subjective mind. It's not that, it is mentally imputed. It doesn't entail that. Anyway, this is a good attempt.
How about categories?
What like?
Democracy.
Democracy, how?
Because there's nothing outside there that is it without the mental labeling that creates the whole.
How do you know that it is labeled, is mental?
Holiness of Dalai Lama title.
Like,
there, but that all is a title.
what did he say? He's in Dharamsala.
Right, there's a person there.
That's it.
Imputed this label on.
So what? So you mean to say that Dalai Lama is imputed, or the name Dalai Lama is imputed?
The name.
So there is nothing. There is no fun. You are saying the name is name. There is no fun.
Democracy might be harder.
Democracy
It's
is
just the name of a bunch of conventions. But
it's not name. It comes into being by name. It's not the name. It comes into being by the people's false conceptions and labeling. It is not the name in itself.
Can you state the question?
Okay. So far, have you come across, coming to have some kind of a glimpse, that for something to exist, it is not necessary to exist 100% objectively. Money. Currency. Why?
Because there's just a piece of paper there. The only thing that gives it its value is our conceptions about it.
Are you sure? And then why not, so conceptually you say, it has no value.
Well,
Then it becomes devalued?
the value of a piece of paper and ink.
It's considered as value by all of us, so then...
Quite good. I would say sometimes, you organize a fair, a celebration or kind of, we call it fair. Yeah. Then what happens is that, you want to make it a point that all people spend the money in this, So the trick is that you print a lot of, coupons. And say $2, $3, like that. And then anyone who wants to take part in this, the only money that you can use is in form of coupon, for which you have to come and buy them, get it from us in advance. Not that you can get it, right away tomorrow. So you must get it today. And the function is really, very exciting. So without money, you cannot do anything, So you make sure that all money comes in you, and the paper money is valid just for one day, And then if they are left with them, the money is already there in you. So then the third day is just paper, That's one thing. But still, this is what even the ordinary people who has not studied philosophy, this thing understands. So have you learned something new, which the ordinary people has not understood?
Self.
Self and what? Self. Well, this, if you've understood this, then is where the, object of prostration.
But the self that they need.
No, it seems like you have not understood this thing, the cup, and the red color of the cup, the separateness of, it's not the cup that you have understood to be lacking objective existence. It's not the red color of the cup which, you understood it to be lacking objective existence. What you have understood, if I'm not wrong, What you should have understood, right now is the separateness of the cup and the red color of the cup. So objectively, you cannot really tease them apart. It's just the same thing.
That's what
But-
I thought was a good example. Because when you look out there and I see you, I think there's a self in there.
Yeah.
All there is this body and this mind, just like there's the cup and the color of the cup, there's this body, mind, and person.
Yeah.
But the person is something that I see as one with that, but it's actually distinct.
So this means here you should be very, precise. So here you are getting a clue of the mental imputation of the distinctness, the separateness of the person and the person's body, and not the person itself.
Yeah.
Right? So just as I told you right now, that you have not discovered that the cup is lacking objective existence, nor you have discovered the red color of the cup as lacking objective existence. What you have discovered so far, if you're more intelligent than me, is that you have discovered the separateness of the cup and the red color of the cup as lacking objective existence. Right? Because you come to know that, where is it? It's simply created by our mind. Because we know mentally we can have the cup and the color of the cup, which can be changed, but the basic cup always remaining. One with the characteristic always remaining, the other which is changeable, so to separate. So this is what our mind can think, which means two separate things, right? And yet objectively, you find it nowhere. The separateness, So mentally, you can create these two things, distinct. But in terms of the person, although you might say that, it's just a body and a mind, but where's the person? How do you know that this is mentally created? If you ask, then you have no clear answer. Whereas the separateness, it becomes quite easy. Not only that it is not findable objectively there, but mentally you can explain that how these two are, this separateness is what your mind creates. You can explain it, right? It's not just that it's not findable there. Then you can also account as to how that is created by our thought, right? But as for the person self, you may be able to say that, it's not over there because it's just a body and mind. But then if you ask, how then is it created by mind? Then you're stuck there, right? So up to this point, the information that you have got so far says that, the cup, the separateness of the cup and the red color of the cup is mentally imputed. So this is what is taught by Sutrantika school. And the Sutrantika school is not intelligent enough to teach us that the table is lacking objective existence, that the cup is lacking objective existence, that the self is lacking objective existence. Instead, they would very much encourage you to say, no, the self exists 100% objectively. And the cup exists 100% objectively. So, if you go back into what the Sutrantikas, explain about the ultimate reality and the conventional reality, they say that, something which exists, something which doesn't exist through imputation, which is functional thing. Let's go back and see. Let's go back and see what are the mutually inclusive, objects with the ultimate truth. What are they?
Functioning thing, ultimate truth, specifically characterized phenomena, impermanent thing.
Good. All impermanent things should necessarily be ultimate reality, right? Including the self, the cup, and all these things, right? So this is why I've been telling you. So Sutrantika simply opens, the door. It's just at the gate to open the door. That's it. And it really doesn't, give you in-depth understanding as to how things don't objectively exist, right? So they still adhere to the belief that the self and all impermanent things, they exist so objectively. They're not at all mentally imputed, right? So, in short, according to Sutrantika, everything that is mentally imputed, this is unreliable. Everything which is mentally imputed is unreliable. You know, a kind of example that I've already given you last time. Say, oh, I'll give you a mentally imputed $1,000. This is, you know, I'm going to impute $1,000 in your pocket and go to the market, supermarket, and buy everything. Then you will laugh. What do you mean? You know, it makes no sense. Even if you mentally impute it, you know, but it's not going to have any value because it's so unreliable. There's no basis for me to rely on it, you know. So mental imputation connotes unreliability. So whereas if something is really substantially existent, you know, then it should be independent of the imputation, mental imputation. So the mental imputation and substantial existence, these two are contradictory, opposing. So all impermanent things and functional things, they are so concretely existing over there with so well self-defined nature, right? Okay. Now we are close to answering Venerable Jambel's question, because you all have some basis to receive the response to this. Still, there is one way in between the response to go to Venerable Jambel's response and where we are now. Now, the next thing is, how is there the cup in front of me? Yes, right? The cup is there. And is there the separateness? Is there the separateness of the cup and the red color of the cup? Yes. But where is it? It is through your own mind. You know? Okay. So one is by means of our mind. One is by means of, independent of our mind. Right? So, if something is created or imputed by... Now listen, this is really very important. If something is created by a mind, which means that, although that thing is not of any value, it is not reliable, but still we can, account for something. We can, blame or say that, there's some basis for it. What is that? It's the mind, And we have a very strong kind of adherence to the mind, So it's the mind which brings the existence of that separateness of the mug and the red color of the mug, right? So it is there. It's the mind. Then what about the mug itself? It is not imputed by a mind. How does it exist? Not just, existent, but it is able to retain its existence. How is it able to retain its existence? It's not that, it lasts for 5 minutes and it disappears. Sorry?
Aren't they the ones that have the past, present, and the future? Or kind of...
So how can it reside? How can it abide or remain in the past, present, and future? By what means?
By having the substance.
Sorry?
By having the substance.
Good. Good. By having the substance, meaning the previous substance of the cup giving rise to the second substance. Second substance giving rise to the third substance, which means the first moment giving rise to the second moment giving rise to the third moment. It is independent of our mind, but it retains its nature, it retains its identity by the power of its causes, its own causes, right? And what is the cause of the present cup? Is the previous moment of the cup. Is the cause of the present moment of the cup. And what is the cause of, is it going to be, if you don't break it, or, then it's going to be in the future as well. Third moment as well. So what is responsible for the third moment to arise? Second moment of the cup, you know? So which means that there is a self-operation within the cup itself. So it doesn't really, for that to retain, for that to, you know, exist, or for that to sustain, it doesn't really need the help of a mind. It doesn't really have to have the help of the mind for it to retain its continuity. So how does it then do to maintain the continuity?
Self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient, or we say, you know, it is self-operating. It is self-operating, you know. It operates on its own way. The first moment giving rise to the second moment giving rise to the third. Within itself, you know, it is independent of the subjective mind for its arisal. Right? Okay, now look. So now look, you know, within the phenomena, according to Sutra, still we are in Sutrantika. According to Sutrantika, now we come to know that, you know, within this domain of phenomena, some sustain in self-operation, through self-operation. You know, the former moments, they give rise to the second moment giving rise to a third, which means is independent of a subjective mind. One group. And another group is that it cannot retain through self-operation. It depends on whether the mind holds it or not. If the mind holds it, it's there. If the mind, you know, releases it, it disappears. You know, it's purely by means of subjective mental imputation. There are two. Right? Okay. If you're happy about it, now is the response to Venerable Jambul's question. By the way, Venerable Jambul, I request you to articulate your question to the floor again. Articulate it.
Okay, I'll use your example of the mug.
Yeah, good.
The mug is red. So there's the emptiness of the red mug.
Better say mug itself rather than red. The mug, the red, emptiness. Then when, you know, as there's more and more the ramification in terms of characteristics, it becomes more and more complicated. Say the mug and the emptiness of the mug.
Emptiness of the mug. But then if I paint the mug blue, then I still have the emptiness of the previous mug.
Good.
But now I have a different mug.
Yeah.
So, but I have the same emptiness. So how is it that emptiness can then be permanent when the object is changing?
I don't know whether it's the same emptiness, but surely the first sentence that you can say, correct me if I'm wrong, the first sentence that you can say is that while the mug is impermanent, how the characteristic of the mug, emptiness, be permanent. While the basis of the emptiness, the mug, is impermanent, how can the characteristic of that, which is, you know, emptiness, be permanent?
Because there are...
This is a question.
Yeah.
Okay. This question, right? Now to make it still clearer, say, just as the mug, when we say the mug is impermanent, it simply means that the mug doesn't retain its, you know, it assumes transitoriness, which means it changes moment by moment, which means that the first moment of the mug is not the same as the second moment of the mug, you know. So within milliseconds, it changes. Even okay. So the mug and the flower, right? The mug and the flower, they are, you know, are they separate?
Yes.
Yes, they are. Now look, be very careful with each of the steps. The first question is, are they separate? Yes. Now the second question, are they separate objectively or by simply merely on the mental conception? Are they, you know, Are they separate? Are they separate entity-wise or nominally? Entity-wise. What do you mean by separate entity-wise?
They're not the same entity-wise.
Objectively, you can point to two different things, right? Okay. Right. Now my next question, is what about the separateness of these two? Is it, okay, first, why did you say that entity-wise these two are separate? Because objectively we can point to two different things, right? So when you say entity-wise, which means objectively, okay. Now, instead of saying whether these two are separate, instead of that, our discussion shifts its object. The separateness of the mug and the flower, does it exist? Is it something pointable objectively, or is simply on the mind? Or similar on the mind, right? So how can you then reconcile Jambel's question? Because if the separateness is simply on the mind, then you keep away your mind, the separateness should be lost. In which case they should come together.
Yeah, but the isolate doesn't quite exist.
Isolate means, yeah, you are right.
And that's what your
Yeah.
answer is. The isolate doesn't, the separateness, the isolate is the separateness. That's one thing. And that continues to exist.
Are you responding to Jambel's?
Yeah, that's my answer.
To Jambel's.
Yeah.
But I think his question is really very smart, because you simply try to first of all follow this logic. If the separateness of the cup and the flower is mentally imputed, if you take aside the mental imputation of mind, then the separateness is also withdrawn. In which case the two should merge together, because they are not separate. Separateness is lost. Right? Right?
They exist in self-operation.
Of which? The separateness. The cup. So what is there? Even if these two, self-operates, but the question, Jambel is not saying that, these two things will annihilate. What he's saying is that the separateness of these two will annihilate when the mind is withdrawn, because of which, they are no more separate. If you say they are no more separate, these two are one. These two should merge. Okay, now look, the response, there can be two elements. Number one, if the mind withdraws, this will happen. But fortunately, the mind will never withdraw. Number one. Number two, these two, the cup and the flower, these two are objectively separate, but the separateness is not objectively existent. Right? These two exist objectively as separate, but the separateness does not exist objectively. Write down that bit. The cup and the flower of the cup, the two, exist as objectively separate. This is really very important. We need to reflect over and over again to get to this understanding. Let me say it again. The cup and the flower, these two exist as objectively separate. But the separateness of the cup and the flower does not exist objectively. So this is answer.
Then how can you assert that they are separate entities?
If they are separate entities, because it's on the mental level. Even if something does not exist 100% objectively, even on something can exist. We can exist something positing. We can posit something existing, even if that exists on the mental level.
Yes.
So this means that the separateness really functions that way. the separateness of the two, even if that is simply on the mental level, still it exists.
But you said objectively they exist as separate.
So this is what I'm saying. You should be able to say this first. The two things exist objectively as separate. But the separateness itself does not exist objectively. And if you first write this, think more. Okay, so then what about Jambul's okay, so with that, now say the separateness of the separateness of the mug and the flower. So now say, although I don't expect, no one, even all Buddhas cannot expect us to understand this concept within just 1 hour, right? Still, with that as a basis, say we have understood this. The separateness of the cup and the flower, is not something objectively existent. It is mentally imputed. If that is the case, then the separateness of these two, doesn't have to follow the rules of causation, cause effect, cause effect, cause effect, which means the separateness is not impermanent. Impermanent connotes causality, causation. It's not impermanent. It exists and it's not impermanent, which means it is permanent, right? So while the cup and the flower, while these two are impermanent, but the separateness of these two is permanent, right? So similarly, likewise, we have to first of all understand as to how, emptiness is something not objectively findable. It exists, but not objectively findable, which means it is mentally imputed, which means it doesn't follow the rules of cause effect, cause effect, cause effect, which means the emptiness is not impermanent, which means it exists, but not impermanent implies permanent, right? So while the cup is impermanent, but the emptiness of the cup is impermanent, right? Okay, so now let's see. Okay, the one thing which is associated with the single indifferent, according to Sutrantic school. So since that I told you that this is the opening, this opens the door to the ultimate reality of the emptiness and so forth, according to Prasangika or the Madhyamika. So we're surely going to do this issue. Very likely I'm going to translate, a section, just half a page from Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on Supplement to the Middle Way as to how the emptiness is, systematically proved in the Swatantrika Madhyamika, which can also be extended to Prasangika Madhyamika. So this I'm going to, if I can translate this and have it printed, then we're going to do that on a more auspicious occasion. So that you decide. Preferably, I want to do that in the morning. A morning in the sense before lunch, rather than doing it in the afternoon. So this is really very, a precious subject, and we need our mind to be really very fresh. So the morning time would be better. Okay, so I leave it, up to Venerable Tharpa and all of you to decide the date for that. Okay, next, then we continue reading. Furthermore, they assert directionally partless particles and temporarily partless moments of consciousness in accordance with the proponents of the great exposition. So this is another important point of Sutrantika and Vaibhashika, because when they are pushed as to how things exist truly, they say that, oh, the table exists truly. But then Madhyamikas, they come and say that, how can the table exist truly? Is the top part of the table, and say no. Then what of the legs? No. So where's the table? So the table does not exist truly. Then even the Sutrantikas, they know that the legs of the table, are not the table. They know that the top part of the table is not table. They know that. But still they say that the table exists truly, So then when they're pushed as to how, then you still adhere to this belief that the table exists truly, then it would say that, oh, you're right, we cannot locate to any part of this as the table, but you try to, it exists totally independent of our mind. The table exists totally independent of our mind. Existence by means of total independence of our mind is what is known as true existence. It's not mentally created. It's not illusion-like. Illusion connotes mental creation. So something which is totally independent of mental creation is true existence. The table exists in that fashion. So then again, when the Madhyamikas they push, the table is illusion-like because, although it appears to be so solid there, but when you locate as to where it is, it's not findable. Then the Sutrantikas, they would very proudly say, look, you are right. Although the table, if you simply talk about the table, it seems to be like illusion-like, but it's not the case. It is created by, the subtlest building blocks which are totally independent of our mind. And what is that? Then they will say that, oh, the table is various parts, therefore none of the parts is the table. And you break it into further, smaller, and then they will say that finally there's going to be something which cannot be, separated into parts, which is known as partless, directionally partless particles. So if you can really have something, which cannot be broken into smaller parts, this means that wherever you point to, it is that very object. For example, when you try to point to the table, you are unable to find it because it has various parts. But whereas if you can have something which has no parts, then when you point to it, you're not pointing to part of it. You're pointing to the real whole thing. So therefore, they say that finally, even the table, although it is not findable, among its parts, but it is created by the very subtle particles which are not, which have no parts, which are so independently existent of the mind. And these particles are known as the directionally partless particle, right? So which meaning that, say, this is the subtlest, we cannot really imagine it. It's something, they come up with. So let's say this is the subtlest particle. And they say that it has no directional parts. It has no east, west, north, south. So, whereas if they are unable to hold on this idea, if they are rejected fully, if they are disproved of the existence of this particle, then the whole philosophy will collapse. Right? So actually, right now we don't agree with him, but deep down we fully support him. We fully disagree with the Madhyamikas in saying that there's no particle. Deep down, innate thinking. But from our philosophical learning, from our the artificial learning that we have, it sounds a little bit, which cannot be agreed upon. So whatever is the case, this is the belief. Then in the domain of the world of the mind, again the mind exists so truly. So which mind? This morning's mind, afternoon's mind, this morning mind. This morning mind again has many hours. First moment, second moment, like that. Then again, if you try to break it into smaller and smaller in terms of the temporal segments, then we see that eventually, again from their point of view, they assert, the temporal partless moment of mind. Temporal meaning, the mind cannot be said that this is east, this is west, like that. So the mind can be only spoken of in terms of time, in terms of time. Say the mind, today's mind, which means the mind which first began from the first hour, which lasts till the 24th hour, right? So this mind. So this whole mind we break not in terms of directions, but in terms of the temporal, in terms of the time. Do you mean the first hour of the mind, the second hour of mind, or third hour of mind? First hour of mind. Or which first hour of the mind? First hour of the mind has further 60 segments, temporal segments. The first part, second part, third part, like that. So again, when you push that way, then Swatantrikas, they say that ultimately there's going to be a mind which has no temporal parts. which cannot be divided as, the beginning and the end. If there's a beginning and end, beginning which is not end, which means there's a segment of the mind which has a beginning, which belongs to the category of the beginning and not to the category of the end, which means there are two parts, temporal parts. So they come to a position, they come to believe that there's a mind, the subtlest state of a mind, subtlest mind, which has no beginning, which has no end, It's so subtle, it has no temporal parts. So again, if anyone is able to disprove, refute this idea of the temporarily partless moment of mind, then again the whole idea of the mind collapses, right? Okay, what we have next is yes, please.
How is this? This sounds like similar to I think it's the Hindu idea that there's some fundamental substance out of which everything arises.
Exactly.
How is this different, and how does this make this a Buddhist view?
This is a Buddhist view because accepting this may not necessarily discard your belief in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Still, you can think of eliminating the afflictions.
But it is so. I'm right, but it is similar to this Hindu idea.
Absolutely, to some extent. So therefore, look. So I'm happy, that you are trying to you try to compare and contrast the different, schools, including the Hindus. So therefore, it is really very important to study the tenets. Because of the studying of the tenets, then you come to know the kind of understanding of the emptiness or whatever happening in you. You can then judge whether this is a true understanding of the emptiness according to Prasangika, or this tallies more with Sutrantika, the Swatantrika Madhyamika, or Chittamatra, or Hindu, or Hindus, or Swatantrika Madhyamika. You can really make it so clear. Otherwise, what the danger, the reason for the Buddha teaching all these four schools is that, if these the detailed explanation of the different tenets is explained, if that is not explained, then the danger is that the Buddha gives a very straightforward meditation on emptiness. You do that, and then you may end up with the kind of experience of just mere nothingness, which actually might reflect the meditation on nothingness, which even the Hindu practitioners do, and you don't have any device designed within yourself as to how to really check whether your understanding tallies, reflects the actual understanding of emptiness as intended by the Buddha, or reflects the Hindu meditation of nothingness, So you have no device to do that. So what is that device? It is your exposure to the different tenet systems. So this is really wonderful. So you're trying to compare, so here the Sutrantikas, they're trying to think of some very concrete, substantial existence. So does this really reflect what the Hindu philosophers speak of, substantial existence? No. Again, there's a slight difference. The Hindu philosophers, they speak about the Atma, which is so concrete, solid, like that. And even Sutrantika, let alone Sutrantika, even Vapashka, the first Buddhist school, reject this idea of the Atma, So the concreteness of the Atma is stronger than the kind of substantial existence the Sutrantika believe, So every time you upgrade yourself in the higher and higher Buddhist schools, then you see that the concreteness, the idea, the belief of the concrete object becoming, lighter and lighter and lighter, And then when you reach to Swatantrika Madhyamika, then it's just like a kind of very thin sheet left, the concreteness to that extent. And then when you're able to eliminate that as well, then it's the final unraveling of the Prasangika Madhyamika's view. So therefore, look, So this is really the beauty, the quality of learning the different tenor systems, trying to compare, contrast, So thereby, you can really check by yourself as to which level of understanding you have reached in terms of emptiness. That's very good.
And so then I have another question.
Yeah.
About partless particles. So then are they posited that all, at the finest little division of particles,
Yes.
they're all the same, all these partless particles?
All same, all
And
same.
what makes a table and what makes
All same. So when they are arranged, say the ball, when they are arranged in such a way that all these, they are arranged, the configuration is in such that from distance it looks round, it is a ball. Yeah, shape. Whereas from distance, if it looks square-like, it's table.
How about color? And how could you distinguish red and blue?
Then,
If they are the same partless particles.
but again, so this I think science can explain so well.
No.
For the
Because it can't be.
I don't know whether I'm satirical or not. Anyway, very good question. Yeah.
Is this what are atoms?
What are the colors?
Atoms. We have atoms.
Okay, yeah, the colors. Yeah, they are four basic colors. Blue, yellow, red, and white. There are four basic colors, which means these atoms, although they are all same in terms of having no direction, but they have different colors. This is is not my own creation. It's not my own creation. This is what it said in the collection of the sutras. Not the collection of sutras, collection of the topics. So there's a separate text where you are taught as to how many basic colors are there. So there are four basic colors, and they are taught 8 secondary colors like that. And then by blending all these different colors, you can have millions of different colors. Yeah.
How do they rectify if a particle is directionally partless, then it wouldn't matter how many you put together, they would never amount to anything. Because the left side would always be as close to, like if this paper was partless, or the pen was partless, the right side of the paper would always be just as close to the left side of the paper as whether the pen was there or whether it wasn't. It would be the same distance apart, because there is no distance, the pen is no distance.
But they are not, each of these atoms or the particles, they are not touching each other. They simply remain, separated by vacuum.
But if you have two, you still say this is the right, this is the.
So of course, if there are two, then we can speak about it becomes parts.
Yes, but but you say this is to the left of this one. This means
Yeah.
this one has a left. And
No. This is your creation. This is your mental creation.
What I mean is, it doesn't matter how many you have, they might as well not exist.
Why?
Because the right side is the same distance
This is your
as the
thinking.
left side. So this air right here, if my hand is partless, then this is just as close to this.
No.
So provided
No distance that's
provided everything should necessarily have a parts, then your logic works. Right?
How would it not work if they...
When you bring in the issue of partless particle, then it's not that something when you speak about it should be closer or more further away. So when you speak about the further and close, it naturally brings you in the idea of the parts. So whereas this is the issue of the particle with no parts. So you simply have one particle here, second here, and third here. That's it. So in between they are separated by space.
The space, then this space has some distance between it.
What?
The space between the particles has some distance.
Yes.
But the particles themselves don't have any distance between them. So
They
if
have.
we were to measure it,
They have.
they have distance,
They have.
and then they must have a left side and a right side.
Why?
Because there's a difference that's traveled between the two.
No. So it's like, actually quantum mechanics, it speaks very strange, Quantum mechanics, to some extent, quantum mechanics can be, can be correlated with Sotrantika school, and sometimes it can be correlated with Prasangikas. So how the particles work is beyond. It's something very strange.
Beyond space.
Newtonian physics.
Newtonian is more classical.
Yeah.
So that is according to what you are thinking.
You're presenting.
Yeah,
If you apply the same logic to time,
yeah.
then you're definitely lost.
Why?
Because if you have a moment, that the beginning of the moment and the end of the moment are the same distance from the moments before and after.
It's not same, it's not different.
But it wouldn't matter how many you put together. You wouldn't
Because it has no
know how many
parts.
times.
It is no directional paths. So how come you try to bring in the issue of, the idea of the same or different? Because it has no parts.
Next to it must have parts, because we have parts.
What?
Time has parts.
We in the sense, the gross ones.
Yeah.
Of course, all gross ones, they have parts. But when it comes to the subtlest, there's no parts.
Sense.
Why?
Because then you could add up as many as you want, and it would never amount to gross. It would always be subtle, just a whole lot of subtle, and it would.
Yeah, of course. Whole lot of subtle makes gross.
No.
Of course.
It wouldn't have any parts. No matter how many you put together, you would never get something.
Now let's say, for example, so your body is not self, right? And for example, just a piece of log, it has no capacity to shelter us from sun. And likewise, just you take every bit of the top, and it has no capacity to shelter us completely from the sun. But when you put together, then together, jointly they work to shelter us from sun. Similarly, although each of these are partless, but then jointly, they work to appear as gross.
But if you took one tiny part of the roof and
Yeah.
you made yourself small enough, then it would shed you from sun.
What?
If you were the size of a flea,
Yeah.
then that little tiny part of roof would shed you from sun.
So what's that?
Because you're small enough to exist on that level. But no matter
No,
how-
so what I'm talking about us, the big ones,
well, that's
So
the
these small
point.
bits, each of them, if you take, into consideration each of them individually, they don't have the capacity to give us shade.
Yes, they do. Not full shade.
Yeah, they don't have, they cannot do the full shade, yeah.
But they have some.
They not full shade,
Shade a little.
not full shade, right. So each of these small particles, although they don't have the capacity to give rise to individually give, to give us the appearance of the gross, but each of them are very small part, they can contribute, the capacity to contribute to appear in the gross form. So when they are put together, then overall they will give us the impression that it's gross.
So each one has the tiniest capacity of part to it.
Not part, but grossness.
How is that possible?
How is it not possible?
If it's not, if it by itself has no capacity, then how could it?
Very good, very good, very good, very good, very good, very good. So, this will come in Chittamatra. Very good. But I warn you, what we tend to, one danger is that we tend to study a lot, and then if you don't reflect on them, if you don't try to do, bring the ideas, if you don't try to make the ideas your own ideas, then the danger is that, someone teaches you and you have something to say, but mentally nothing's coming to your mind. This is a danger. Whereas if what you're coming up with right now, if that is not from your former learnings, but from simply, hearing about these things, you feel uncomfortable and then, thought to it by yourself. And if these questions came to you, that's marvelous. This is what is required, right? So whereas some people, they already learn a lot of things, but not really understanding anything there, So when someone says you have something to offer, directly, but in true sense, you are empty. Whereas, contrary to this, hopefully what you are coming up with seems to be from you, within yourself. If that is happening, that's really very good. So this is what is going to be covered in Chittamatra's view, right? So where Vasubandhu in his text by the title 20 stanzas. So he rejected this parts particle by all these reasonings that you have cited. Very good. So I tried to be, to act as, I tried to play the devil's card by acting as the proponent of Sutrantika, but I don't know how far, how successful I am. Okay, so where are we? 20, we are done with, what?
Next page.
106, we have to go to 106, where is it?
It's not labeled.
106, 106. So we're almost.
Starts with however.
However, I see. Okay. Still, we have few minutes. However, the proponents of sutra are not similar to the proponents of the Great Exposition in all respects, because the proponents of the Great Exposition assert that all existence are substantially established as having their own autonomous entity that is not dependent on conceptuality, whereas the proponents of sutra do not accept this. Also, both the proponents of Great, so this part you leave it. Also, both the proponents of the Great Exposition and the consequentialists assert, consequentialist means prasangika, assert that non-revelatory forms are fully qualified forms, but the proponents of sutra, proponents of Madhuni and autonomous, do not accept these as fully qualified forms. So forms means physical, thing. The proponents of what? The Vipashkas, so let me make it more easy. Vipashkas and the highest, the lowest, which is Vipashka, and highest, Prasangika, consequentialist. So these two, they share, some standpoints, one of which is what? Non-revelatory forms. Non-revelatory forms. So you might wonder as to what it is. So non-revelatory forms is what these two schools accept, and not by, other Buddhist schools. You may wonder what that is. What does it mean by that? So just to give you a brief idea, is that, say, when you look at Venerable Jambil, you don't see as something so special which is not found in other, male members, like the work is there, You simply see him as, the one with the monk's robe, right? So even someone who is not a monk, can put on a monk's robe and have his head shaved, right? So you cannot make distinction between the two. But in actuality, since he has a special form which is absent in the other one, who, not being monk but still putting on the monk's robe, so actually in true sense there is one difference. He has a monk's vow. And this monk's vow is in the form of non-revelatory form. It's in the form, but non-revelatory, meaning that no one can really see it. It's not revealed. It's not revealed as something so concrete, which can be perceivable by, other people. It's non-revealed. Whereas the kind of form that we see, the table, the flower, and these things, we can so easily say that, oh, there's a form over there, there's a form over there, So these forms are revelatory, which reveals themselves, their existence. Whereas the monk's vows, the nun's vows, they are forms, but not in the form of revelatory fashion. They are in the form of, they are forms, but which the other people cannot see, which cannot be revealed to the ordinary people, right?
Any examples, except for the vows?
Okay. So what are the examples can we speak of? So the vows is one thing, and then the opposite of vows, the non-vows. There is something called. Say you make a promise that henceforth I'm going to keep on stealing until I reach the age of 50. So this commitment, because of this commitment, even if you don't really engage yourself in the act of stealing, as long as this commitment is there within you, there is constant negativities accumulated. So what is that thing which is accountable for your accumulating the negativities constantly? That is, what is known as the non-revelatory form of stealing always. Right? Similarly, the monks and the nuns, although they don't really act, although they don't really, they may not necessarily do virtuous actions, like the meditating bodhicitta or emptiness and these things. Even while eating food, they keep on accumulating virtues. Why? Because they have this, this non-revelatory virtuous form. Right? So this is the benefit of receiving vows. Okay, so this is what is known as non-revelatory forms. And then also non-revelatory forms can be like, when you achieve a very refined state of meditative concentration. Very refined state. At an advanced level, there is what is known as the non-revelatory form of samadhi. Samadhi meaning refined meditative states. And likewise, when you're able to, reach the path of seeing, the Arya level, again, you achieve a special non-revelatory form known as the non-revelatory form of uncontamination. Uncontaminated non-revelatory form. So this is when you achieve the Arya path.
Would you also say the same of qualities such as like someone having a talent for music and
talent for? Music.
Or playing the piano?
No. So it must be associated with either very refined state of mind, like the very refined samadhi, meditative concentration, like calm abide, even more than calm abiding. Simply achieving calm abiding, I don't think that is sufficient. And then part of Aryas, being able to see the Four Noble Truths directly, non-conceptually, one. And then, other than for the regular persons, like, making a very strong commitment, like, I'm going to observe the practice of celibacy, observe celibacy throughout my life. It requires enormous commitment, So with these commitments, then the non-revelatories, accompany these commitments. So this is according to Vipashka and Prasangika Madhyamika. And this is not accepted by Sutrantic school. Right? But don't worry, it is accepted by Prasangikas. Right? The monastics. Okay, so let's go further. This is not the only difference between proponents of great exposition and the proponents of sutra, because the proponents of great exposition assert that cause and effect as being simultaneous, whereas the proponents of sutra and above do not assert this. Cause and effect, the simultaneity of cause and effect. The Vipashkas, the proponents of what? Great exposition, or Vipashkas, they believe in the simultaneity of cause and effect, whereas actually Chittamatra, one part of Chittamatra also believe in that. But Sutrantika doesn't believe in that, and all Madhyamikas don't believe in the simultaneity of cause and effect. So you may wonder, from the facial expression of Jambel, I'm compelled to give you an example to convince you that this can be possible. Although I myself don't agree to this, but Vipashkas, they really come up with a very insightful example, which you cannot say no to this. So what they come up with is that, say, in olden times, when they put up tents, how do they do? They put up 3 pillars, joined together at the top, right? Like this. So none of the pillars, they fall. Pillar A is helping pillar B and C to stand. Pillar B and C is helping pillar A to stand, mutually helping each other. Which means when it helps the other is the result of this. And B helps A, which means A is the result and B is the cause. And A helps B, so which means B is result and A is cause. So B is cause and result both. So they are mutually, and all these two exist simultaneously. You know, don't say no to this. Okay. Okay, we'll stop here.